Hi, my name is Kate, and I am on week 29 of long COVID. And today is all about low energy garden hacks. So, one of my primary symptoms has been fatigue, and also with dysautonomia, I'm very bad at standing and being upright. Gravity is not generally my friend. So what does that look like for gardening? So for gardening this year, the name of the game has been as low effort crops as possible. Things like carrots, like onions, like potatoes, where you put them in the ground and leave them alone. You know, you have to deal a little bit with weeds, but as long as you I put down a thick layer of untreated, no chemically sprayed straw mulch. Make sure you're positive that the straw hasn't been treated with any herbicides, because that will wreck your garden. But as long as you've got clean straw, it's a great way of suppressing weeds, and it breaks down really easily into the soil within one garden season. So growing crops that you can just plant and not worry about them. One of the best things that I did last year when I built this garden before I got sick was put in a drip irrigation system on a timer. It's connected to a timer, this buddy right here, and two regular garden hoses that connect to soaker hoses in the raised garden beds, so I don't need to worry about hauling and being out in the heat. If I'm having a day when I'm just not getting out of bed, I know that the garden is still going to get water. Raised beds. If you are not well inclined to the ravages of gravity, one of the best things about raised beds is you can just sit right on the corner. And now I can reach really the entirety of the garden bed. My garden beds are 4 feet across, so I can reach 2 feet in with my arms on this side, 2 feet on the other side. I can reach everything in the bed, no problem. And my last major tip is growing things that you don't need to really process or do much with in order to enjoy. So rather than, say, growing something like shelling peas, where you have to deal with the pods and getting them all shelled, growing things like snap beans, where I basically pop off the ends while I'm harvesting them, and then I'm good to go. You can eat them raw, you can roast them, you can saute them, you can put them on a sheet pan. Lots of ways to eat them that aren't going to take a whole lot of effort, and that when I am preparing them in the kitchen, I always sit on a high chair by the counter, so that way I don't have to stand while I'm cooking. And finally, a little bit of a garden tour for this year. For me, I love being out in the garden. It is one of my happiest places, and finding a way to be out in it this year has been such a labor of love, and the people who love and care about me, whenever anyone asked how they could help these last 6 months, I asked for help with planting my garden. So all of these crops are seeds that were planted by people who are dear to me, and every time I'm out in the garden, I just am reminded of the people who I care about so much, and that their labor of love is feeding me body and soul. I'd be remiss in talking about low energy expenditure, accessible gardening, and not mention the Aerogarden. The Aerogarden, and there are other similar products like it, is an indoor system that has a built-in grow light, water canister, plant food to grow plants hydroponically. So I just started a new round of herbs. I've got dill, Thai basil, savory, sweet basil, oregano, and thyme. Lots of great herb options. I've also grown tomatoes in this system, and when I wasn't sure if I would be even able to have an outdoor garden this year, just knowing that I could sit at the kitchen table and and still have a garden. And especially in the winter months, it was so lovely to be able to still have some homegrown food, and to just be able to witness new life showing up, even when it didn't feel like there was a lot of new life happening for me with my illness. So I highly recommend a system like the Aerogarden as well. This system runs for about $80, though they have smaller and larger options at varying price points. First things first, garden dog, Murphy the Chocolate Lab. My first bed, both two first beds have these lovely PEX pipe arches, which grew snap peas for the first part of the season, and now they are growing butternut squash in this first one, and then the second one has Tramontina squash, which get to be about 3 feet long, and you can eat them as both summer squash and winter squash once they fully ripen. I'm all about finding beauty, and I think it's really important, even in a vegetable garden, to have flowers. These zinnias are just such a happy sort of fuchsia color, and I can see them whenever I'm in the living room or the kitchen, and it just brings me a lot of joy. So this first bed, in addition to the flowers, has about 100 storage onions and mostly harvested carrot patch, which I'll finish harvesting this week. And once everything in this bed is harvested, it's going to make the transition to being dry beans. This second bed is 100% fingerling potatoes. I've already harvested the first row of yellow fingerlings. I shared that as a YouTube short. The second and third row are red and purple, which just take a little bit longer. And before long, I'll be able to plant the next round, so have even more potatoes. And again, for fingerling potatoes, unlike some larger potatoes that you have to chop in order to do something with them, fingerling potatoes, you just need to rinse off, and then you can just pop them right in the oven with some olive oil and salt and pepper, and they're food. Because again, keep it easy. Don't add extra steps. Kale, oodles of kale. My husband doesn't really like vegetables, but he will eat kale, so hence a giant row. We've got cucumbers on this trellis. Those are nice and easy, and you might know, if you have it, dysautonomia means consuming a whole heck of a lot of salt, and cucumbers, either as pickles or just on their own, can take a whole lot of salt and still be delicious. So cucumbers will always have a place in my garden. These purple bush beans, again, really great in terms of you don't have to do a whole heck of a lot with them to make them delicious. Throughout this bed, there are also peppers and eggplants. They're starting to peak up above the bush beans, and they'll start putting on fruit in the next few weeks. And then this final bed is tomatoes. Tomatoes are my favorite vegetable by far. In past years, I have done 3 raised beds worth of tomatoes, upwards of 50 plants. But the thing about tomatoes is you need to process them in order for them to, be worth your time. So into things like salsa or sauce, and standing over a hot canner with long COVID is just not a good bet. So this year I reduced it down to 1 raised bed of tomatoes with 4 slicers, and then 2 cherry tomato plants, which is basically what we as a household can eat fresh. And then there is lots of celery up front, which I think is the one thing that I will need to dehydrate because I just planted a lot of it. But one thing that I really hate doing is chopping celery. So by growing the celery all at once and by chopping it up in the food processor and then putting in the dehydrator and then just throwing the dehydrated sliced celery bits into soups and stews all winter long, it means that I just had to chop celery once. So even though it is some processing, it does save me energy in the long run. And then just a brief glimpse at the Leaning Tower of thornless blackberries. Very excited for those to start producing. And then the strawberry and asparagus bed. So that's it. I tend to garden in the late afternoon, early evening because where our trees are located on our property, it throws the whole garden into shade in the late afternoon. So that way I can stay nice and cool. I try to sit as much as I can. When I need to, I bring my cane stool out and about. And I'm just so incredibly grateful to still be able to garden this year. Again, this has been a labor of love from many people dear to me, and I'm just so grateful for everyone who's lent a hand so that we can have this life-giving and nourishing space in so many ways. So I hope that wherever you are in your healing journey, you are able to find some things and reconnect with things, even in a slightly different way, that bring you joy and remind you of who you are and who you were before you got sick, but also maybe some ways to reimagine creatively what that can still look like going forward. So from my healing journey to yours, take good care, everybody.